All right, why don't you go ahead and begin?
So,
Letter 10, Miss Howe to Miss Clarissa Harlow. What odds had some people have? Miss Clarissa Harlow to be sacrificed in marriage to Mr. Roger Soames? Astonishing. I must not, you say, give my advice in favor of this man. You now have convinced me, my dear, that you are allied to a family that could think of so preposterous a match, or you could never have had the least notion of advising in his favor. Ask me for this picture. You know I have a good hand at drawing an ugly likeness. But I'll see a little farther first, for who knows what may happen, since in such matters or in such a train, and since you have not the courage to oppose such an overwhelming a torrent. You ask me to help you a little of my spirit. Are you in earnest? But it will not now, I doubt, do you service. It will not sit naturally upon you. You are your mama's girl. Think what you will, and have violent spirits to contend with. Alas, my dear, you should have borrowed some of mine a little sooner. That is to say, before you had given the management of your estate into the hands of those who think they have a prior claim to it. What vows a father has not that father two elder children? And do they not bear his stamp and image more than you do? Pray, my dear, call me not to account for this free question, lest your application of my meaning prove to be as severe as that. Now I have launched out a little. Indulge me one word or more in the same strain. I will be decent, I promise you. I think you might have been that avarice and envy. I think you might have known that avarice and envy are two passions that are not to be satisfied, the one by giving, the other by the envied person's continuing to deserve and excel. Fuel both all the world over to flames insatuate and devouring. But since you ask for my opinion, you must tell me that all you know or surmise of their inducements. And if you not forbid me to make extracts from your letter for the entertainment of my cousin in the little isle who longs to hear more of your affairs, it will be very obliging. But you are so tender of some people who have no tenderness for anybody but themselves, that I must conjure you to speak out. Remember that a friendship like ours admits of no reserve. You may trust me my impartiality. It would be an affront to your own judgment if you did not. For do you not ask my advice? And have you not taught me that friendship should never give a bias against justice? Justify them, therefore, if you can. Let us see if there be any sense, whether sufficient reason or not, in their choice. At present, I cannot, and yet I know a good deal of your family, have any conception how all of them, your mama in particular, and your Aunt Harriet, can join with the rest against judgments given. As to some of the others, I cannot wonder at anything they do or attempt to do where self is concerned. You ask, why may not your brother be first engaged in wedlock? I'll tell you why. His temper and his arrogance are all too well known to induce women he would aspire to receive his addresses, notwithstanding his great independent acquisitions and still greater prospects. Let me tell you, my dear, those acquisitions have given him more pride than reputation. To me, he is the most intolerable creature that I ever saw. The treatment you blame, he merited from one whom he would have addressed with the air of a person intending to confer rather than hoping to receive a favor. I ever love to mortify proud and insolent spirits. What think you? Makes me bear Hickman near me? But that man is humble and knows his distance. As to your question, why your elder sister may not be provided for first, I answer, because she has no man, but who has a great and clear estate. That's one thing. Another because she has a younger sister. Pray, my dear, be so good as to tell me what man of great and clear estate would think of that elder sister while the younger was single. You are all too rich to be happy, child. For must not you of by constitutions of your family marry still richer? People who know in what their main excellence consists are not to be blamed, are they? For cultivating and improving what they think most valuable. Is true happiness any part of your family view? So far from it that none of your family but yourself could be happy were not they rich. So let them fret on, grumble and grudge, and accumulate, and wonder what ails them that they have not happiness when they have riches. Think the cause is want of more, and so go on heaping up till death, as greedy and accumulator as themselves. Gather them into his garner. While then, once more I say, do you, my dear, tell me what you know of their avowed and general motives, and I will tell you more than you will tell me of their failings. Your Aunt Hervey, you say, has told you. Why, as I hinted, must I ask you to let me know them when you condescend to ask my advice on the occasion? That they prohibit you corresponding with me is wisdom neither wonder at nor blame them for, since it is as evidence to me that they know their own folly, and if they do, is it strange that they should be afraid to trust another's judgment upon it? I am glad you have found out a way to correspond with me. I approve it much. I shall more if this first trial of it proves successful. But should it not, and should it fall into their hands, it would not concern me but for your sake. We have heard before you wrote that all was not right between your relations and you at your coming home, that Mr. Solmes visited you and that with the prospect of success. But I concluded the mistake lay in the person and that his address was to Miss Arabella. And indeed, she had been as good-natured as you plump ones generally are. I should have thought her too good for him by half. Thought I this must be the thing, and my beloved friend is sent for to advise and assist her in her nuptial preparations. Who knows, said I to my mamma, who knows, said I to my mamma, but that when the man has thrown aside his yellow, full-bucketed barouche and his broad-brimmed beaver, both of which I suppose were Sir Oliver's best of a long standing, he may cut a tolerable figure dangling to church with Miss Bell. The woman, as she observes, should excel the man in features, and where can she match so well a foil? I indulged this surmise against rumor because I could not believe that the absurdest people in England could be so very absurd as to think of this man for you. We heard, moreover, that you have received no visitors. I could assign no reason for this except that the preparations for your sister were to be private and the ceremony sudden. Miss Lloyd and Miss Biddulph were with me to inquire what I knew of this, and your not being at church either morning or afternoon the Sunday after your return from us, to the disappointment of a little hundred of your admirers, to use their words, it was easy for me to guess the reason to be what you confirmed, their apprehensions that Lovelace would be there and attempt to wait on you at home. My mama takes very kindly your compliments in your letter to her. Her words upon reading it were, Miss Clarissa Harlowe is a very admirable young lady. Wherever she goes, she confers a favor. Whomever she leaves, she fills with regret. And then a little comparative reflection. Oh, my Nancy, that you had little of her sweet obligations. No matter, the praise was yours. You are me, and I enjoyed it. The more enjoyed it because, shall I tell you the truth? Because I think myself as well, I am worried, but for this reason, that had I 20 brother James and 20 sister Bells, not one of them, not all of them joined together would dare treat me as your presumed treats you. The person who will bear much shall have much to bear all the world through. 'Tis your own sentiment, grounded upon the strongest instance that can be given in your family, though you have so little improved by it. The result is this, that I am fitter for this world than you, you for the next than me. That's the difference. But long, long for my sake and for hundreds of sakes, may it be before you quit us for company more congenial and more worthy of you. I communicated to my mamma the account you gave me of the strange reception you received. Also, what a hard wretch they have found out for you, and the compulsory treatment they give you. It only set her on magnifying her lenity to me on my tyrannical behavior, as she will call it. Mothers must have their way, you know, to the man she so warmly recommends, against whom it seems there can be no just exception, and patiently upon the complaisance I owe her for her indulgence. So I believe I must communicate to her nothing further, especially as I know she would condemn the correspondence between us, and that between you and Lovelace, as a clandestine and undutiful thing. For duty implicit is her cry, and moreover she lends a pretty open ear to the preachments of that starch old bachelor, your Uncle Anthony, and for an example to her daughter would be more careful how she takes your part to be for the cause ever so just. Yet is not this right policy? Neither. For people who will allow nothing will be granted nothing. In other words, those who aim at carrying out too many points will not be able to carry any. But can you divine, my dear, what that old preachment making plump-hearted soul, your Uncle Anthony, means by his frequent amberling hithers? There is such a smirking and a smiling between my mamma and him, such mutual praises of economy, and that is my way, and this is I do, and I'm glad to have your approbation, sir. And you look into everything, madame. Nothing would be done if I did not. Such exclamation marks against servants, such exaltations of self, and dear heart, and good lack, and lass-a-day, and now and then their conversation sinking into a whispering accent if I come across them. I tell you, my dear, I don't above half like it. Only that these old bachelors usually take as many years to resolve upon matrimony as they can reasonably expect to live, or should I be ready to fire upon his visits and recommend Mr. Hickman as a much proper man to your mama's acceptance? For what he wants in years, he makes up in gravity. And if you will not And if you will not chide me, I will say that there is a primness in both, especially when the man has presumed too much with me upon my mama's favor with him, and is under discipline on that account, as makes them seem near of kin, and then in contemplation of my sauciness and what they both bear from it, they sigh away and seemed so mightily to compassionate each other that if pity be but one remove from love, I am in no danger, while they both are in a great deal, and I don't know it. Now, my dear, I know you will be upon me with your grave airs. So in for the lamb, as they say, in for the sheep, and do yourself look about you. For I have a pull with you by way of being aforehand. Hannibal, we read, always advised to attack the Romans upon their territories. You are pleased to say, and upon your word too, that your regards, a mighty quaint word for affections, are not so much engaged as some of your friends suppose to another person. When need you give me one to imagine, my dear, that the last month or two has been a period extremely favorable to that other person, whom it has an obliger of the niece for his patience with the uncles? But to pass that by, so much engaged, how much, my dear, shall I infer? Some of your friends suppose a great deal. You seem to own a little. Don't be angry, it is all fair, because you have not acknowledged to me that little. People, I have heard you say, who affect secrets always excite curiosity. But you proceed with a kind drawback from your avertment, as if reconciliation has given you a doubt. You know not yourself if they be so engaged. Was it necessary to say this to me, and to say upon your word to it? But you know best. Yet you don't neither, I believe. For a beginning love is acted by a subtle spirit, and oftentimes discovers itself to a bystander when the person possessed, why should I not call it possessed, knows it has not a demon. But further you say, what preferable favor you may have for him to any other person is owing more to the usage he has received and for your sake borne than to any personal consideration. That is generously said. It is in character. But oh, my friend, depend upon it, for you are in danger. Depend upon it, whether you know it or not, you are a little in for it. Your native generosity and your greatness of mind endanger you. All your friends, by fighting against him with impolitic violence, fight for him. And Lovelace, my life for yours, notwithstanding all his veneration and assiduities, has seen further that veneration and all the assiduities so well calculated to your meridian will let him own as he has seen, in short, that his work is doing for him more effectively than he could do it for himself. And have you not before now said that nothing is so penetrating as the vanity of a lover, since it makes the person who frequently sees it in his own favor, what is not and hardly ever fail of observing what is, and who says Lovelace wants vanity. In short, my dear, it is my opinion that from the easiness of his heart and behavior that he has seen more than I have seen, more than you think could be seen, more than I believe you yourself know, or else you would have let me know it. Already, in order to restrain him from resenting the indignities he has received and which are daily offered him, he has prevailed upon you to correspond with him privately. I know he has nothing to boast of from what you have written, but is not his inducing you to receive his letters and to answer them a great point gained? By insisting that he should keep this correspondence private, it appears that there is one secret you do not wish the world to know, and he is a master of that secret. He is indeed, as I may say, that secret. What an intimacy does this beget for the lover? How is it distancing the parent? Yet who, as things are situated, can blame you? Your condescension has no doubt heretofore prevented great mischief. You must be continued for the same reasons while the cause remains. You are drawn in by a perverse fate against inclination, but custom, with such laudable purposes, will reconcile the inconveniency and make an inclination. And I would advise you, as you wish to manage on an occasion so critical, with that prudence which governs all of your actions, not to be afraid of entering upon a close examination into the true springs and grounds of your generosity to that happy man. It is my humble opinion, I tell you frankly, that upon inquiry, it will come out to be love. Don't start, my dear. Has not your man himself had a natural philosophy to observe already to your aunt that love takes the deepest roots in the steadiest of minds? The deuce take his sly penetration, I was going to say, for this was 6 or 7 weeks ago. I have been tinctured, nor on the coolest reflection could I account how and when the jaundice began, but had been head over and ears, as the saying is, but for some of that advice from you, which now I return back to you. Yet my man was not half so. Say what, dear? To be sure, Lovelace is a charming fellow, and were he only, but I will not make you glow as you read. Upon my word, I won't. Yet, my dear, don't you find at your heart somewhat unusual to make it go throb, throb, throb as you read just here? You do. Don't be ashamed to own it. It is your generosity, my love. That's all. But as the Roman augur Caesar said, beware the Ides of March. Adieu, my dearest friend, and forgive the very speedily by the newfound expedient. Tell me that you forgive. Your ever affectionate Anna Howe. Letter 11, Miss Clarissa Howe to Miss Howe. Wednesday, March 1st. You were both nettled and alarmed. You both nettled and alarmed me, my dearest Miss Howe, by the concluding part of your last. At the first reading, I did not think it necessary, said to myself, to guard against a critic when I was writing to so dear a friend. But then recollecting myself, is there not more in it, said I, than the result of a vein so naturally lively? Surely I must have been guilty of an inadvertence. Let me enter into the close examination of myself, which my beloved friend advises. I did so and cannot own any of the glow, any of the throbs you mention. Upon my word, I will repeat, I cannot. And yet the passages in my letter upon which you are so humorously severe lay me fairly open to your agreeable rally. I own they do, and I cannot tell you what turn my head had taken to dictate so oddly to my pen. But pray now, is it saying too much when one who has no peculiar regard to any man says that there are some who are preferable to others? And is it blamable to say those are the preferable who are not well used by relations, yet dispense with that usage out of regard to oneself, which they otherwise resent? Mr. Lovelace, for instance, I may be allowed to say, is a man to be preferred to Mr. Solmes, and that I do prefer him to that man. But surely this may be said without it necessarily being a consequence that one must be in love with him. Indeed, I would not be in love with him as it is called for the world. First, because I have no opinion of his morals, and think it a fault in which our whole family, my brother excepted, has had a share, that he was permitted to visit us with a hope, which, however, being distant, did not, as I have observed heretofore, entitle to any of us to call him to account for such of his immoralities as came to our ears. Next, because I think him to be a vain man, capable of triumphing, secretly at least, over a person whose heart he thinks he has engaged. And thirdly, because the assiduities and veneration which you impute to him seem to carry a haughtiness in him, as if his address had merit in it, that it would be equivalent for a lady's favor. In short, he seems to me so to behave when the most unguarded, as if thought himself above the very politeness which his birth and education, perhaps therefore more than choice, oblige him to show. In other words, his very politeness appears to me to be constrained, and with the most remarkable, easy, and genteel person, something seems to be behind in his manner that is too studiously kept in. Then, good-humored as he is thought to be in the main to other people's servants, and this even to familiarity, although, as you have observed, a familiarity that has dignity in it is in it not unbecoming a man of quality. He is apt sometimes to break out into passion with his own. An oath or curse follows, and such looks from those servants as plainly show terror, and that they show that they should have fared worse, had they not been in my hearing, with a confirmation in the master's look of a surmise too well justified. Indeed, my dear, this man is not the man. I have great objections to him. My heart throbs not after him. I glow not, but with indignation against myself for having given room for such an imputation. For you must not, my dearest friend, construe common gratitude into love. I cannot bear that you should. But if ever I should have the misfortune to think it love, I promise you upon my word, which is the same as upon my honor, I will acquaint you with it. You bid me to tell you very speedily and by the newfound expedient that I am not displeased with you for your agreeable rally. I dispatch this therefore immediately, postponing to my next the account of the inducements which my friends have to promote with such an earnest the address of Mr. Solmes. Be satisfied, my dear. Be satisfied, my dear, meantime, that I am not displeased with you. Indeed, I am not. On the contrary, I give you my hearty thanks for your friendly premonitions, and I charge you, as I have often done, that if you observe anything in me so faulty as you would require from you to others in my behalf the palliation of friendly and partial love, you acquaint me with it. For, methinks, I would so conduct myself as not to give reason even for an adversary to censure me, and how so weak and how so young a creature avoid the censure of such. If my friend will not hold a looking glass before me to let me see my imperfections. Judge me then, my dear, as any indifferent person, knowing what you know of me, would do. I may at first be a little pained, may glow a bit, perhaps be found less worthy of your friendship than I wish to be, but assure yourself that your kind correction will give me reflection that shall amend me. If it not, you will have fault to accuse me of that which utterly be inexcusable. A fault, let me add, that you should not accuse me of it. If in your opinion I am guilty, you will not be so much, so warmly my friend, as I'm yours, who has never spared you, you know, my dear, on the like occasions. Here I break off to begin another letter with you, with the assurance, meantime, that I am and ever will be your equally affectionate and grateful Clarissa Harlowe. Letter 12, Miss Howe to Clarissa Harlowe, Thursday morning, March 2nd. Indeed, you would not be in love with him for the world. Your servant, my dear, nor would I have you, for I think, with all the advantages of person, fortune, and family, he is not by any means worthy of you. And this opinion I give as from the reasons you mentioned, which I cannot but confirm from you what I have heard of him but a few hours ago from Mrs. Fortescue, a favorite of Lady Betty Lawrence, who knows him well. But let me congratulate you, however, on your being the first of our sex that ever I heard of who has been able to turn on that lion, love at her own pleasure, into a lapdog. Well, but if you not have the throbs and the glows, you have not, and are not in love. Good reason why, because you would not be in love, and there's no more to be said. Only, my dear, I shall keep a good look out upon you, and so I hope you will upon yourself. For it is no manner of argument that because you would not be in love, you are not. But before I part entirely with the subject, a word with your ear, my charming friend. 'Tis only by way of caution and in the pursuance of the general observation that a stander-by is often a better judge of the game than those who play. Maybe it not that you have had and have had such cross creatures and such odd heads to deal with, as with have not allowed you to attend to the throbs, or with or you had them a little now and then, whether having had two accounts to place them to, you have not by mistake put them to the wrong one. But whether you have had value for this Lovelace or not, I know you will be impatient to hear what Miss Fortune has said of him. nor will I keep you no longer in suspense. 100 wild stories she tells of him, from childhood to manhood. For, as she observes, having never been subject to contradiction, he was always as mischievous as a monkey. But I shall pass over these whole 100 of his puerile rogueries, although indicative ones, as I may say, to take notice of well of some of the things you are not quite ignorant of, as of others you know not, and to make a few observations upon him and ways. Mr. Fawcett owns what everyone knows is that he is notoriously, nay, avowedly a man of pleasure, yet says that in anything he sets his heart upon. He rests, it seems, not above 6 hours in the 24, any more than you. He delights in writing, whether at his uncle's or Lady Betty's or Lady Sarah's. He has always, when he retires, a pen in his finger. One of his companions, confirming his love of writing, has told her that his thoughts flow rapidly to his pen, and you and I, my dear, have observed on more occasions than one, that though he writes an even fine hand, he is one of the readiest and quickest of writers. He must indeed have had early a very docile genius, since a person of his pleasurable turn and active spirit could never have submitted to take it long or great pains in attaining the qualifications he is master of, qualifications so seldom obtained by youth of quality and fortune, but such, especially of those of either, who like him have never known what it was to be controlled. He had once the vanity, upon being complimented on these talents and on his surprising diligence as a man of pleasure, to compare himself to Julius Caesar, who performed great actions by day and wrote them down at night, and valued himself that he only wanted Caesar's outing to make a figure among his contemporaries. He spoke this, indeed, she says, with an air of pleasantry, for she observed, and so have we, that he has the art of acknowledging his vanity with so much humor that it sets him above the contempt which is due to vanity and self-opinion, and at the same time half persuades those who hear him that he really deserves the exaltation that he gives himself. But supposing it to be true that all his vacant night hours are employed in writing, what can be his subjects? If, like Caesar, his own actions, he must undoubtedly be a very enterprising and very wicked man, since nobody suspects him to have a serious turn. And, decent as he is in conversation with us, his writings are not probable, such as will rebound either to much his honor or to the benefit of others were they read. He must be conscious of this, since Mrs. Fortescue says that in the great correspondence by letters which he holds, he is as secret and careful as if it were a treasonable nature, yet troubles not his head with politics, though nobody knows the interest of princes and courts better than he. That you and I, my dear, should love to write is no wonder. We have always, from the time we could hold a pen, delighted in the epistolary correspondence. Our employments are domestic and sedentary, and we can scribble upon 13 innocent subjects and take delight in them because they are innocent, though were they to be seen, they might not profit or please others. That is such a gay lively fellow as this, who rides, hunts, travels, frequents the public entertainments, and has means to pursue his pleasures, should be able to set himself down to write hours together, as you and I have heard him say frequently he does? That is a strange thing. Miss Fortescue says that he is a complete master of shorthand writing. By way, what inducements could a swift writer as he have learned to make shorthand? She says, and we know it all too well to be, that he has preparingly money and memory at hand. Whatever his other vices are, all the world, as Miss Forches says, he is a sober man. And among all his bad qualities, gaming, that great waster of human time as well as fortune, is not his vice. So that he must have his head as cool and as reason as clear as the prime of his youth, and his natural gaiety will permit him, and by early morning next hours, a great person of time upon his hands to employ in writing or worse. Miss Fortune says that he has one gentleman, who is more his intimate and correspondent than any of the rest. You remember what his dismissed bailiff said of him and his associates? I don't find that man's character of him was in general pretty just. Mrs. Fortescue confirms this part of it, that all his relations are afraid of him, that his pride sets him above owing obligations to them. She believes he is clear of the world and that he will continue so, no doubt from the same motive that makes him avoid being obliged to his relations. A person willing to think favorably upon him would hope that a brave and learned and diligent man cannot be naturally a bad man. But if he were better than his enemies, say he, and even worse, he is bad indeed. He is guilty of an inexcusable fault in being so careless as he is of his reputation. I think a man can be so but from one of these two reasons. Either he is conscious and he deserves the evil spoken of him, or that he takes pride in being thought worse than he is. Both very bad and threatening indications, since the first must show him to be utterly abandoned, and it is but natural to conclude from the other that what a man is not ashamed to have imputed upon him, he will not scruple to be guilty of whenever he has the opportunity. Upon the whole, and upon all that I could gather from Miss Forderson's, Mr. Lovelace is a very faulty man. You and I have thought him too gay, too inconsiderate, too rash, too little a hypocrite to be deep. You see, he would never disguise his natural temper, haughty as it is with respect to your brother's behavior to him. Where he thinks a contempt due, he pays it to the utmost, nor has he compliance enough to spare your uncles. But were he deep, and ever so deep, you would soon penetrate him, if they would leave you to yourself. His vanity would be your clue. Never man had before, yet, as Mr. Fortune has observed, never did man carry it off so happily. There is a strange mixture in it of a humorous vivacity. For but one half of what he says of himself when he is in the vein, any other man would be insufferable. Talk of the devil is the old saying. The lively wretch has made me a visit, and but just gone away. He is all impatient and resentment at the treatment you meet with, and full apprehension too that they will carry their point with you. I told him my opinion that you will never be brought to think of such a man as Soames, but it would probably end in a composition never to have either. No man, he said, whose fortunes and alliances are so considerable ever had so little favor from a lady, from whose sake he had borne so much. I told him my mind as freely as I used to do. But whoever was at fault, self be judged. He complained of spies set upon his conduct, and to pry into his life and morals, and this by your brothers and uncles. I told him that this was very hard upon him, and the more so as neither the one nor other perhaps would stand a fair inquiry. He smiled and called himself my servant. The occasion was too fair, he said, for Miss Howe, who never spared him, to let it pass. But, Lord help their shallow souls, would I believe it? They were for turning plotters upon him. They had best take care he would not pay them in their own coin. Their hearts were better turned for such works than their heads. I asked him if he valued himself upon having a head better turned than theirs for such works, as he called him. He drew off, and then he ran into the highest profession of reverence and affection for you. The object so meritus, who can doubt of the reality of his professions? I do, my dearest, my noble friend, I love and admire you for the generous conclusion of your last more than I can express. Though I begin this letter with an impertinent rally, knowing that you always love to indulge my mad vein, yet never was there a heart more glowed with family love than that of your own Anna Howe. Letter 13, Clarissa Harlow to Miss Howe. I now take upon my pen to lay before you the inducements and motives which my friends have to espouse so earnestly the address of Mr. Soames. In order to set this matter in a clear light, it is necessary to go a little backward and perhaps to even mention some things you already know. And so you may look upon what I'm going to relate as a kind of supplement to my letters of the 15th and 20th of January last. In those letters, of which I have kept memorandums, I gave you an account of my brother and my sister's implacableness to Mr. Lovelace, and the methods they took, so far as they had then come to my knowledge, to ruin him in the opinion of my friends. And I told you that after a very cold, yet not very direct, affrontive behavior to him, they all of a sudden became more violent and proceeded to personal insults, which brought upon the last unhappy rencounter between my brother and him. Now you must know that from the last conversation which passed my aunt and me, it comes out that this sudden vehemence on my brother and my sister in part is owing to stranger reason, stranger than the college-bound antipathy on his side, and or to slightly love on theirs. To wit, to an apprehension that my uncles intended to follow my grandfather's examples in my favor, at least uh, a high degree than that they wish they should, an apprehension founded. It seems a conversation between my, it seems a conversation between my two uncles and my brother and sister, which my aunt communicated to me in confidence as such an argument to prevail upon me to accept of Mr. Solmes's noble settlements, urging that I have reason and upon urging that I have such seasonable compliance would frustrate my brother and my sister's established view, for they are now in the opinion and love for all my fathers and my antiques and my uncles. I will give you the substance of this communicated conversation after I have made a brief introduction and observation on the two, which, however, I hardly need to make you, who are all so well acquainted with us, did not receive, did not the series or thread require it. I have more than once mentioned to you the darling view that some of us have long had of raising a family, as it is called, a reflection as I have often thought upon our own, which is not inconceivable or inconsiderable, or upstart one on the other side. Of my mamma's, especially of you too frequently, it seems entertained by families which have greater substance and a following reasonable. My uncles had once extended to this view to each of our children, urging that the uncles were going to buy the pencils. While my brother, as the only son, thought the two while my brother, as the only son, thought the two girls might be very well provided for by 10 or 15,000 apiece, and that all of the real estate in the family, to wit, my grandfather's father, and to wit, he had an expectancy of from his godmother, would he make such a fortune preparable, and would such a fortune give him such an intent as entitled him to be going on and to amend the current bylaws. With this view, he gave himself heirs very easily. The grandfather and uncles were his stewards, that no man has ever had better. That the daughters were in but incumbents, let's see, that the daughters were but encumbrances and drawbacks upon a family, And this low and familiar expression was often in his mouth and uttered orally, always with self-compliance, which an imagined happy thought can supposedly to give the speaker, to wit, that a man imagined that man who has sons brings up chickens for his own table. Though once I had said have their necks wrung off, whereas daughters and chickens brought up for the tables of are whereas daughters are chickens brought up for the table. And this low and familiar expression was often in his mouth and uttered always with self-compliance, which is an imagined happy thought, I suppose, that can be given to a specific in wit. That a man imagined happy thought that a man imagined happy to wit
Are you all right, Kirk?
Yeah, I'm just trying to find my place here.
Okay.
That a man who has sons bring up chickens for his table. Though I once made a comparison stagger with him by asking him if the sons if the sons to make it hold were to have their necks run off, whereas daughters or chickens brought up for the table of other men. This accompanied with the equally polite reflection that to induce people to take off their hands, the family stock must be impaired into the bargain. Used to put my sister out of all patience, and although she now seems to think a younger sister can only be an encumbrance. She was then often proposing to me to make a party in our favor against my brother's rapturous views, as she used to call them, while I was considering the liberties he took of a sort as the effect of a temporary pleasantry, which in a young man not naturally good-humored, I was glad to see as a foible that deserved rally, but no other notice. But when my grandfather's will, of the purport of which in my particular favor, until it was opened, I was as ignorant as they, had lopped off one branch of my brother's expectation, he was extremely dissatisfied with me. Nobody indeed pleased, for although everyone loved me, yet being the youngest child, father, uncle, brother, sister, all thought themselves postponed as to the matter of right and power. Who loves not power? And my father himself could not bear that I should be made sole, as I may recall it, and independent, for such the will as to that estate and the powers it gave, unaccountably, as they all said, made me. To obviate, therefore, everybody's jealousy, I gave up to my father's management, as you know, not only the estate, but the money bequeathed to me, which was a moiety of what your grandfather had by him at his death, the other moiety being bequeathed to my sister, contenting myself to take as from his bounty what he would be pleased to allow me, without desiring the least addition to my annual stipend. And then I hoped I had laid all envy asleep. But still, my brother and sister, jealous, as is now evident, of my two uncles' favor for me, and of the pleasure I had given my father and them by this act of duty, were every now and then.
That's an hour.
Okay.
If
All
you
right,
just want to
Brad.
finish the page or whatever. You good?
Yeah, we're good. Let me
Okay.
cut this off and let's pick a time for tomorrow.
Okay.
Hold on.